I'm Dr. Annie Macaulay. I am the creator of Talkie Play. I wanted to explain a little bit about why I created Talkie Play in the first place and what it's meant to us as a family. To do that, I'm going to go back actually many years to when I was 18. I used to be a competitive skier. I did downhill skiing, anything that went fast, really fast down the mountain. I did Grand GS. That was my jam. Unfortunately, I ended up having a traumatic brain injury from a falling ski. And I went into a coma and I lost the ability to walk and talk. It was really hard. And you'd think after being so athletic and everything that learning to walk again would be the hardest part. But it wasn't. It was learning to talk because talking was so much more than just talking. People would forget that I was in the room. They would talk for me. They would talk over me. Um, People just kind of saw that there was something wrong and they tried their very best to make up for it. Um, it was extremely difficult. I had really great support around me and I did relearn everything. So much so that I went on to get a PhD in medicine at Melbourne University. I got married and I've had two beautiful children, but I wasn't left unscarred. And it all kind of hit me when my daughter was about 1 year old. I noticed that she stopped making the babbling sounds that babies make. She was really quiet all of a sudden. What I found out after getting her tested was that she'd lost her hearing and she'd had lots of throat infections. Um, and those ear infections had meant that it sounded like she was underwater for her. And she was really struggling to understand us. She was struggling with any form of communication with us, and she couldn't talk, and she wasn't developing any speech. She was then diagnosed with a speech and language delay. We were in a fortunate position. We were both working at major hospitals and we were able to get her diagnosed quickly. We had clinical care and we could afford to pay for speech pathology. Um, but a lot of it I found rested on me. I had to do practice with her. And the speech pathologist was training me in practice techniques to do at home. The only problem was that she wouldn't do it for me. And my days pretty much looked like this. I would be at home. I would have two children at home with me, and one of them spent the majority of time on the floor, tantrum, throwing stuff all over the place, hitting me, and then trying to take it out on her brother. It was impossible. And I couldn't get her to have any form of communication with me, let alone even practice any speech techniques. I didn't know what to do. And I felt so very alone. And I felt really embarrassed that my child couldn't do this. I had one that did, and then I couldn't get her to do it. And I felt at the time as well this deep rush of empathy because I knew exactly what she was feeling. I'd wanted to throw things, I'd wanted to hit people when they couldn't understand what I was saying. And I couldn't do anything about it, even though I knew what that was like for her. And I was just paralyzed. I sat at my kitchen table one day, and I remember this point vividly. And I was just crying because I couldn't do anything and I knew what the problem was. And I remember my tears dripping into my coffee and then thinking, that is disgusting. I'm never going to drink that coffee. And she was still screaming on the floor. And I must have been crying pretty loudly because my son, who was 4 years old, came over and hugged me. And he said, "Mum, we can do this. It's going to be okay." And it was a beautiful moment, but it was also a really low point because, you've hit rock bottom when your 4-year-old child is the one comforting you and not the other way around. And I am so glad with what I did next because what I did next was listen. And what he said was magical. He said, "Mum, you're trying so hard to make this work. But what if, Mum, what if we could just make our house talk? What if our house was like Beauty and the Beast? A little bit of magic. Then you wouldn't have to keep saying chair, 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 pointing to the chair to try and get her to talk. She could just go over and discover the chair, and the two of us could run around in this magical house together playing. And you wouldn't have to worry anymore, Mum, because the house would help." And I hugged him and I told him he's a beautiful boy. And I knew inside, though, in my heart of hearts, that things like that, like magic and fantasy worlds, they just weren't possible. And that his ideas were the ideas of a child. But it stayed with me. And I kept thinking, what if? Like, what if this was an idea for play? What if this was an idea I could do? And I started reading. I mean, I have a PhD. I'm an academic by training, so I did what I do best. I started reading papers on associative learning, on linguistics and motivational theory, and I then started teaching myself how to code. I built the tech on the theory that made it work. And I remember the first time that I made the chair in our house talk. She turned to me and pointed at it, and like she discovered the chair. Not that I had spent weeks and weeks and weeks of no sleep building it to make it talk. She didn't see that at all. She didn't see that I'd had any part in it. She saw that she had found the chair. And within minutes of tapping it and it saying chair, 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 she said chair. And in that moment, I felt relief. I felt relief that she could talk. But it wasn't just that. She was intentionally communicating. She was making eye contact. She was pointing. And we had a moment. We had a moment together, but we had a moment as a family. And all of a sudden, I felt so close to her, and I felt a part of her world, and I didn't want to ever let go of being part of that world. I desperately wanted to learn what was her favorite color. I love doing art and crafts. I come from a family of artists, and I wanted to paint with her, and I wanted to know what she wanted to paint. I wanted to know her favorite creatures. I wanted to know, when we went to the museum, which dinosaur did she like. I discovered she likes a T-Rex, and she loved to make the roaring sound. I discovered that she likes stingrays, and she was really fascinated that there were 7 different types of stingrays. I made more and more things talk, and I used the scientific research that I was reading about and the opinions of experts that I was talking to develop the games. I made it say individual words, I made it do songs, and I made do sentences and concepts to extend her learning. I'd created a way for her to learn, for her to learn her way, in a way that she said, I did it myself. And she was using her natural home environment to do it. And more than that, I'd built a way for us to communicate and to bond. And it kickstarted my 101 on everything there is to be Grace. And I soon discovered that she's an awesome person. And she has huge thoughts and huge ideas brewing. And she loved being understood. And she loved to lead. And when we started communicating, all those tantrums, they started to disappear. And all that frustration and everything that was happening in our family around that, it melted away. And instead, what I was left with was these experiences of things that we could do together. And it was a pure delight. She is now 8 years old, and she is a leader. She recently, like this year, she ran and was elected to school council. She didn't even tell me that she was running. She got up on stage and made her speech. And she told everyone to vote for her. because she learnt from an early age that her opinion matters, that she has the right to be heard, and she was given the tools to communicate. And that's what I want for every child. I want them to have the tools to communicate their way so that they can say, I did it my way, and know that their opinion matters. And that's why Talkie Play exists. Thank you.